Hey guys, tonight we slip into the wooden labyrinth of old Edo, Tokyo before it was Tokyo, where the air smells faintly of pine smoke and dried fish, and your sandals crunch softly on gravel streets. The lamps sway above you, the paper glowing like soft moons. You look around and realise everything, every wall, every roof, every beam is made of wood and paper. You probably won't survive this, you think, half laughing, because one spark from a kitchen hearth could turn this whole dreamlike city into a furnace. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, let quiet settle in, and ease yourself into the calm rhythm of tonight's story. You stroll through Edo, capital of the Tokugawa shoguns, in the early 1700s. It's a city of nearly 1 million souls, sprawling across a delta of bridges and canals. The night is alive with the hush of distant shamisen, the slosh of water buckets, and the faint creak of lattice doors. You notice how close the houses are, shoulder to shoulder like gossiping neighbours, their roofs tiled or thatched, their walls thin as memory. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of charcoal braziers and something metallic, the scent of fear disguised as readiness. Edo was, quite literally, a tinderbox. Fires were so common they earned nicknames. The Flowers of Edo. A poetic way of admitting the city burned beautifully and often. Every few years, sometimes every few months, an ember would escape a cooking pot or a lantern would tip in a gust, and the result was catastrophic. Historians still argue whether the architecture's fragility or the human stubbornness to rebuild the same way was to blame. You suspect both. You turn a corner and see the warning signs, tall fire watch towers jutting above the roofs like skeletal trees. From their platforms, watchmen scan the horizon for flickers of orange. They carry wooden clappers, hyoshigi, which they snap together in sharp bursts to alert the city. It's the Edo version of a siren, except somehow quieter, eerier. Down below, people live with an odd blend of fatalism and pride. Fires are expected, like summer rain or a neighbour's argument. Merchants build storehouses of plaster to save their goods, but everything else, homes, shops, tea houses, is resigned to impermanence. You watch a carpenter repairing a beam and realise he isn't building for eternity. He's building for the next blaze. The shogunate, aware of the danger, made fire prevention a civic obsession. Regulations dictated roof tiles, fire breaks, even how wide streets should be near the castle. But wood is stubbornly seductive. It's cheap, easy to shape, warm against winter wind. And so, Edo lived with its paradox. A magnificent wooden city, perpetually ready to burn. You pause at Nihonbashi Bridge, the heart of Edo's network. Beneath you, dark water carries reflections of lanterns like drifting petals. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Not for the hour, but perhaps for a small blaze snuffed out before it grew. Or maybe it's a warning. The people nearby don't even flinch. Fires here are like uninvited guests. You just make room. There's a saying you overhear from an old man sipping sake near the bridge. Fires and quarrels are the flowers of Edo. He grins, revealing a missing tooth as if recalling both fondly. You can't tell whether he's drunk or just philosophical. A gust of wind rushes through, flapping Norin curtains, and you imagine the chaos if those flames truly came alive, the shouting, the bells, the scramble for buckets. But amid that imagined panic, you also picture something heroic. Men in matching coats, shouting in rhythm, hauling ropes, climbing ladders into the smoke. That's the story your mind latches onto tonight. The Hikeshi, Edo's firefighters, who fought flames not with hoses but with raw strength, ropes, hooks, and the balance of gymnasts. You can almost hear them before you see them, the thump of their clogs, the bark of commands, the slap of wet cloth. They're the city's most fearless spectacle. Some say they're half warrior, half artist. Others say half drunken daredevil. The truth, as always, wobbles somewhere in the middle. A young boy runs past carrying a bucket larger than his head. You wonder if he dreams of becoming one of them someday. In a world where samurai wield swords, these men wield water and axes, and somehow their courage feels just as sharp. The fires shaped Edo's soul. They didn't just destroy, they renewed, forcing citizens to rebuild, reinvent, and rehearse resilience. When the ashes cooled, carpenters returned, merchants reopened, and the city exhaled. The shogunate enforced new codes, fire breaks widened, yet Edo remained Edo, combustible, vibrant, alive. You glance again toward the horizon where faint smoke curls upward. Maybe it's from a kitchen, maybe from disaster. Either way, the night feels charged, like the city itself is breathing through embers. You draw your haori tighter and keep walking, following the faint echo of men shouting in unison, the hikshi already gathering. Somewhere in the darkness a conch shell sounds, a low, mournful note signalling a fire alarm. Lanterns sway, feet rush, and before you can think, you're swept into their world, running toward the flames instead of away. The line between courage and madness blurs beautifully here. You feel it in your chest like a second heartbeat. Edo's wooden streets might vanish overnight, but tonight you walk among the men who refuse to let the city go quietly. The embers reflect in your eyes as the first shouts rise. You know, somehow, that this is only the beginning, the first spark in a long fiery dance that would define an era. You keep running, breath clouding the air, the rhythm of sandals and wooden gita echoing against the cobblestones. Ahead, you see smoke curling above the rooftops, turning the moon into a pale smear. The street bends toward a marketplace, what used to be a peaceful tangle of stalls and laughter, now glowing orange at the edges. Somewhere someone yells, "Kajida! Fire!" and it spreads faster than the flame itself. The first figures you spot in the chaos are the hikshi, Edo's firefighters. They arrive not in uniforms of sleek red and helmets of steel, but in short indigo coats with bold crests painted on the back, white against blue, like waves crashing through smoke. Their heads are wrapped in towels, faces streaked with soot, bodies wiry from labour. You realise that these men are not samurai but townsmen, carpenters, labourers, roofers, ordinary people turned heroes. You follow them into the turmoil, hearing the clatter of iron hooks and the squeak of damp ropes dragging along the street. The group divides seamlessly, some heading toward rooftops, others preparing buckets, and a few scaling nearby ladders that sway dangerously against the smoke-filled sky. This, you're told, is not their first time. The shogunate organised the first official machibakeshi, town fire brigades, back in 1658, after the Great Fire of Miriki reduced most of Edo to ash. Before that, firefighting was a spontaneous affair, neighbours with buckets, samurai with authority but little technique. After the Miriki disaster, though, the Tokugawa rulers realised something. Power meant nothing if their capital kept burning down. And so, you watch as this system evolved, neat, hierarchical, and fiercely local. There were three main divisions, the Bukihikshi, serving the samurai estates, the Jobikashi, protecting shogunal buildings, and the Machibikashi, the heart of the townsmen's districts, which you see in action now. Each brigade was attached to a ward, marked by unique banners and insignia. The fire crackles louder, chewing through paper walls like a hungry ghost. A leader, his coat bearing a stylized character for his district, points his iron hook upward and shouts. His men respond in chorus, their voices both ritual and rallying cry. The sound sends a shiver down your spine, equal parts chaos and choreography. What you notice most, though, is their speed. They move as though they've practiced for this every day of their lives. And, in a way, they have. Fires were so common that drills became part of daily routine. In every alley, in every home, people lived ready to drop everything at the first bell. Edo's hikshi didn't just fight fire, they existed because of it. There's a strange paradox here. These men didn't fear fire, they needed it. Their jobs depended on it, their reputations grew with every blaze, and their identity as protectors was renewed each time they charged into the inferno. Historians still argue whether this bred recklessness or courage. Some old records hint that certain fires might have been conveniently timed for rival brigades to prove their mettle. But you'll leave that gossip for another night. You help drag a bucket line closer, feeling the splash of warm water on your arms. The liquid steams before it even hits the flames. The fire hisses, momentarily shrinking only to flare again as if mocking you. One firefighter laughs, actually laughs, and calls out that Edo's fires are like cats, playful, disobedient, and impossible to control. A brief lull lets you breathe. Smoke curls like ink over the rooftops, and in that grey haze you notice a banner rising. A black pole topped with a carved wooden plaque, the Matoi. The Haikeshi raise it high to mark their presence, letting the rest of the city know who's on duty, which brigade claims the fight. The matoi catches the firelight and sways like a living thing. It's part signal, part declaration of pride. This ritual, raising the matoi, isn't just practical, it's psychological. The people of Edo, terrified yet mesmerised, gather at a distance, cheering the sight. The Haikshi become heroes in that flickering glow, a mixture of valour and theatre. And you realise something. Firefighting here isn't only about saving lives or structures, it's about preserving honour. One man climbs a rooftop ladder and begins dismantling the edge of a burning house. To fight fire in Edo means to destroy strategically, tearing down nearby homes to prevent the flames from spreading. You win not by saving one building, but by sacrificing several to protect the city. The irony hits you like a cough of smoke. These men are saviours through destruction. As dawn breaks faintly behind the haze, you glimpse the aftermath, the skeletons of charred houses, the blackened posts jutting like ribs. The Haikshi sit in a line, steaming towels on their necks, laughing hoarsely. One slaps another's shoulder and says, "At least the bathhouses will be free tonight." You can't tell if it's a joke or a proverb, but the humour is warm against the ash. Nearby, townspeople bow and offer them rice balls, tea and quiet gratitude. Children look at the soot-streaked men as though they've just battled dragons. In a way they have. The shogunate's administrators soon arrive, inspecting damage, counting losses. Paper scrolls are filled with names, costs and plans for reconstruction. Yet beneath all that bureaucracy there's an unspoken truth everyone understands. The city will burn again. Edo always does. But this time the Haikshi will be ready. They always are. You wander away as the sky shifts from smoke grey to pale gold. A rooster crows somewhere, an oddly cheerful sound after such chaos. Behind you a lone matoi stands upright in the ruins, still fluttering faintly like a flag over conquered flame. It feels strangely peaceful, this aftermath. Fires may ravage the city, but they also knit its people tighter. Every ember carries both loss and renewal. Every brigade call echoes with shared memory. You imagine the city's heartbeat quickening again, readying for the next test. And as you drift toward the faint smell of breakfast rice and rebuilding wood, you realise that this cycle of burning and rebirth wasn't tragedy. It was the pulse of Edo itself, a city always balancing on the edge of flame and faith. You wake to the sound of wood thudding against wood, not the panic of fire this time, but the rhythm of practice. The Haikshi are awake before dawn, and you follow the sound into a broad courtyard near the Sumida River. There you find them performing what looks, at first glance, like a strange morning dance, a mixture of balance, strength, and almost circus-like showmanship. The scent of damp timber and sweat fills the air, and the mist rising from the river wraps the whole scene in pale silver. These men are training on ladders, but not the kind you'd find at a construction site. They're tall, narrow and flexible, made of polished pine, and often carved with symbols of the brigade. You watch as one man braces the ladder's base while another climbs, then another, until a third ascends higher still, balancing with his toes on a rung no wider than a chopstick. There's a gasp from the small crowd gathered to watch, and then the man on top, muscles coiled like rope, lets go with one hand, swinging himself into a horizontal pose, body straight as a beam. You think, this isn't firefighting, this is art. But in Edo, the line between the two blurs beautifully. These gymnastic drills were called hashigo nori, or ladder riding. Originally practical, training for balance and agility on rooftops, it evolved into a ceremonial performance, part demonstration, part morale booster. The Haikshi would show off during New Year's parades and festivals, dazzling the townspeople with their fearlessness. One wrong move meant broken bones or worse, but their calm faces made danger look like grace. You notice one firefighter, barefoot, hair tied back with a towel, climbing while carrying a heavy rope coil. He loops it over a rung, tests its tension, then shouts down to his comrades. They pull together, anchoring the base, their rhythm like the pulse of the city itself. The rope will later be used to pull down walls during fires. Here, though, it's part of their choreography, a reminder that their tools are extensions of their bodies. The ladders are symbols as much as instruments. Their height represented vigilance, their flexibility courage, and the men who scaled them. They weren't merely workers, they were Edo's guardians, a mix of labourer, performer and folk hero. Historians still argue whether the Hikshi trained this way purely for skill or for spectacle. You decide it's both. Edo, after all, loved a good show. Nearby you see others laying out woven mats, dousing them in water, and rolling them into bundles. These mats weren't for comfort, they were for shielding. When a fire broke out, Hikashi wrapped themselves in wet mats before charging through smoke and sparks. Imagine that. Your armour made of straw and soaked water, heavy as guilt but life-saving when embers rained down. You crouch by the edge of the yard and feel the rough texture of one such mat. It smells faintly of river mud and burnt straw. A firefighter jokes, "We sweat in training so we don't cook in battle." The others laugh, their humour easy and unforced, like people who've seen danger too often to take it seriously. The drills continue. Now, 2 men climb separate ladders facing each other, performing mock rescues across thin bamboo poles lashed between them. Their balance seems impossible. You flinch when one wobbles, but his partner catches him with a steadying hand. They nod to each other, no words, just trust. And that's the thing you begin to notice. Firefighting here isn't an individual act of bravery, it's collective rhythm. Every movement depends on another. The ladders sway because one man braces, another climbs, a third secures. If one falters, all fall. Maybe that's why the Hikishi's camaraderie runs deeper than mere teamwork. It's survival through choreography. There's also an odd pride in pain. You overhear one man brag about the time a beam collapsed under him during a blaze, how he landed on his feet anyway, just like a cat. The others tease him, asking if his whiskers were singed. It's that blend of gallows humour and swagger that keeps them sane. You can almost imagine them as Edo's first stuntmen, risking everything, smiling through smoke. A senior officer steps forward, his Haori coat embroidered with a white crest. He calls for the matoi practice next. 2 younger men run forward carrying tall poles topped with ornate wooden emblems. The symbols, some shaped like waves, others like dragons, represent their brigade. One man plants the matoi into the ground, and another climbs it, hanging from the crossbeam, letting his body sway. The wind catches his coat, the fabric snapping like a flag of defiance. This ritual isn't just about signalling the fire's location, it's about declaring presence, pride and ownership. During real fires, the brigade that first planted its matoi at the scene claimed the right to fight it, a system that sometimes led to competitive chaos, but for now, in this calm morning, it's pure theatre. You lean back and watch the rising sun turn the ladders into silhouettes. The air tastes faintly of ash and salt. Someone beats a drum, marking the end of practice. The Hikishi bow slightly, wipe their faces and roll up their gear. The ladder riders grin at the crowd, children clapping shyly. It's strange. You realise these men who spend their lives battling destruction also bring joy. Their courage is contagious, their danger magnetic. Edweets adored them not just for saving homes but for giving the city a symbol of resilience, a living proof that beauty could exist even in ruin. A rumour drifts through the onlookers that some Ikeishi perform their stunts in festivals purely to impress potential sweethearts. You smile. Bravery and romance have always shared a thin border. As the courtyard empties, one of the older firefighters approaches you. His face is carved with lines, his eyes tired but kind. He says, "Fire teaches balance. If you only fight it, you'll lose. You must dance with it." You remember his words long after he walks away, the morning's haze rising over Edo like a gentle ghost. Balance. That's what this whole city runs on. Balance between wood and water, fear and pride, destruction and rebirth. You glance at the ladders stacked neatly by the wall, each scarred from years of fires, yet still standing straight. The Hikishi vanish into the maze of alleys, leaving behind only footprints and the faint scent of wet straw. The calm won't last, you know. It never does in Edo. But for now, you breathe in the quiet, the memory of movement, and the promise of the next blaze that will test everything they've just practiced. The next time you see them, they're not training, they're strutting. It's late afternoon in Edo, the light turning golden against the wooden eaves, and the Hikishi are parading through Nihonbashi like warriors between battles. You blend into the crowd as merchants, apprentices, and even samurai pause to watch. Their footsteps are heavy but rhythmic, their laughter loud enough to make sparrows scatter from the rooftops. You can't help but stare at what they're wearing. The short, square-shouldered Hanton coats, dyed indigo, bear fierce crests on the back, stylized waves, flames, dragons, and kanji so bold they seem to roar even in stillness. The colours are deep and deliberate, achieved through repeated soakings in natural indigo, a dye that didn't just resist flame but announced identity. When soaked and turned inside out during a blaze, the coat became their armour. One firefighter pauses beside you and shrugs off his lantern to show the lining. A riot of colour, crimson, white, gold, depicting mythic heroes slaying serpents or rising from waves. During fires, when they stripped down to these inner designs, the sight must have been surreal. Tattooed skin, soaked coats, glowing smoke, a pageant of power and art colliding in the dark. You realise, half smiling, that Edo's Haikshi fought fires and boredom with equal flair. There's a saying someone whispers behind you. If the samurai are the soul of Edo, the Haikshi are its heartbeat. And maybe that's true. They aren't bound by swords or codes, but by courage and community. When you see them swagger down the street, the crowd's admiration isn't quiet. It's joyous, a kind of civic applause. Their swagger isn't empty, though. Each mark on their coats tells a story, a saved district, a collapsed wall survived, a comrade lost. It's history stitched into fabric. Historians still argue whether the Haikshi's flamboyance was encouraged by the shogunate to boost morale, or simply grew from Edo's culture of theatrical display. Either way, it worked. And then there are their tattoos. Oh, those elaborate full-body masterpieces that peek from beneath soaked collars and rolled sleeves. Not the small symbols you might expect, but grand, mythic canvases. Dragons coil around backs, peonies bloom across shoulders, and heroes like Kintaro or Raijin stride across skin like living murals. You catch a glimpse as one firefighter stretches, his shirt open, revealing a carp swimming up a waterfall. The ink gleams faintly with sweat and soot. In Edo, tattooing was both taboo and pride. For the Hikshi, it wasn't rebellion, it was armour, identity and legend all at once. Some say the tattoos mark those who had faced death and returned. Others claim they were simply irresistible fashion in a city obsessed with art. And yes, maybe a few were there to impress admirers by the riverside. You chuckle quietly. Firefighting and flirting seem to share the same energy. Dangerous, smoky and full of sparks. As the sun lowers, the men gather by a public bathhouse. You follow them inside. No one minds a curious stranger. The air turns thick with steam, the sound of laughter echoing off the wooden walls. This is their refuge, their temple. Here, rank dissolves, soot washes away, and the day's danger becomes memory. They joke about near misses, brag about close calls, and argue over whose tattoo hurt most to finish. A younger man asks his captain why they bother decorating themselves like kabuki actors. The captain grins and says, "When the world burns, boy, give it something beautiful to look at." The room erupts in laughter and you can't help but join. Outside, evening gathers. Lanterns flicker along the canal and the Haikshi step out, still damp, towels around their necks. The glow catches the embroidery on their coats, making each crest shimmer like a badge of light. They walk together toward their quarters, their conversation fading into the hum of the city. You follow the sound of a shakuhachi flute drifting from a nearby house, and for a moment the world feels strangely balanced. Violence and peace, soot and silk. Edo is full of contradictions, but somehow they all make sense here. In a narrow side street you pass a tailor's shop. Inside, rolls of thick indigo cloth lie neatly stacked, and an old man sits at a low table painting a new crest with deliberate brushstrokes. You pause to watch. He glances up and smiles. "For the men who dance with fire," he says softly. "Every line must be bold enough to be seen through smoke." You think of those same men climbing ladders, tearing down walls, standing against infernos, and realise that their style isn't vanity, it's visibility. In chaos, identity is survival. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings, a temple's evening chime, low and calming. But beneath that tone, another sound whispers faintly. A warning bell, the kind used by watchtowers to signal danger. The Haikushi pause mid-step, exchanging glances. For a breath, the world holds still. Then one nods, calm but alert. You feel it again, that sudden pulse of energy that moves through the city like static. Edo lives on the edge of ignition, and the Haikushi are its perpetual guardians, ready to turn from swaggering icons to smoke-drenched saviours in a heartbeat. A cat darts past, tail brushing your leg, and one firefighter jokes, "See? Even the cats are spies for the fire god," laughter follows. Quick and nervous, before they vanish into the gathering dusk. You stand alone for a moment, watching the silhouettes of their banners fade down the street. You realise that every element, the tattoos, the coats, the confident stride, exist for one purpose: to remind Edo that courage can wear a grin and smell faintly of smoke. In a city that burns as often as it dreams, that kind of beauty isn't luxury, it's necessity. You draw your Harry closer and whisper to yourself that if fire ever comes for you here, you'd want to be saved by men like them, half warriors, half performers, entirely alive. The night is damp and restless when you hear the unmistakable clatter of tools, iron on wood, rope against cobblestone. You follow the sound to a narrow alley lit by swaying lanterns, where the Haikshi are preparing their tools. The air hums with quiet urgency, like a stage before the curtain rises. You crouch beside a pile of coiled hemp ropes thick as your wrist, iron hooks gleaming beside them, buckets stacked neatly in rows. Each object seems alive, whispering a story of sweat and survival. The tools of Edo's firefighters are simple, primitive even, but wielded with terrifying precision. You pick up a hook, heavy and cold, the handle worn smooth from countless hands. Its curved tip shines faintly in the lantern light, not sharpened to cut, but strong enough to pull, to tear, to unmake what fire threatens to consume. The Haikshi didn't come to extinguish flames. They came to redirect them, to reshape the battlefield by removing the enemy's food, wood, walls, oxygen. A young man named Jiro, barely older than 20, shows you how it's done. He loops the rope through the hook's ring, knots it with practiced fingers, and swings it in a circle until it hums. When the fire eats a house, he says, we feed it less. He grins, teeth bright in the smoky glow. That's the trick. It's easy to forget that Edo had almost no water pressure, no pumps, no hoses. Water came in buckets passed hand to hand, a hopeless contest against a hungry sky. So the Haikshi fought differently, with strategy, not saturation. When a house caught fire, they'd rush ahead of the blaze and use ropes and hooks to tear down neighbouring buildings, creating a gap, a scar of emptiness to halt the spread. Controlled destruction, fire breaks born of necessity. The sound of snapping beams and falling roofs was their version of a victory drum. You imagine it. Timber collapsing, tiles shattering, smoke mixing with dust, and through it all the shouts of the firefighters echoing like battle cries. They used water only to cool the edges, to protect what little remained, and in the centre of chaos, their ropes became lifelines, stretched between men and meaning. Jiro tells you about the ropes, woven from the toughest hemp, often coated with salt water to resist burning. Each was carefully maintained, coiled with reverence, inspected daily. A snapped rope could mean death, so the Haikshi treated them like relics. Some even named them, as if a rope could carry luck or loyalty. You find it oddly touching. He points to another set of tools lying nearby, thick chisels, wooden mallets, short axes with curved blades. These weren't for fighting fire directly, but for dismantling homes, splitting beams, freeing trapped bodies. They worked fast, decisive, and often brutal. When the flames win, Jiro says, we steal their stage. You're not sure whether that's wisdom or madness, but in Edo, maybe they're the same thing. As dawn threatens the horizon, the Haikshi begin their patrols. You follow them through alleys that still smell faintly of old smoke. They move in pairs, hooks slung over their shoulders like samurai swords. The quiet between them is companionable. No chatter, just a shared readiness. Every few blocks they stop to check for hazards. Lanterns hung too low, woodpiles stacked too close to kitchens. One man knocks on a door to scold a fishmonger whose brazier sits too near his stall. You want to roast the neighbourhood too? He asks. The merchant bows sheepishly and moves it. You realise the Haikshi aren't just responders. They're inspectors, enforcers, guardians of an uneasy peace between people and flame. Edo trusted them not just to save, but to prevent. Their tools may seem crude, but their discipline is almost surgical. Later that morning, you stand near a canal where they clean their gear. Ropes unwind like serpents across the embankment, steaming in the sunlight. Hooks are scrubbed and oiled, every nick and dent examined. The men laugh, teasing one another about who bent a hook last night or who tied the ugliest knot. Yet beneath the humour, there's respect, a quiet reverence for the objects that keep them alive. A carpenter passing by nods in greeting and says, "Those ropes are our angels." He's right, you think. In a city of wood and willpower, salvation isn't divine. It's woven, knotted, and swung by human hands. Historians still argue whether the Hikishi's focus on demolition caused more harm than good. Some say too many homes were sacrificed unnecessarily. Others claim it was the only method that ever worked. You don't need to pick a side. Watching them work, you see the truth in motion. Survival through sacrifice. It's brutal, yes, but also oddly beautiful. The kind of pragmatism only born in a city that burns regularly enough to make peace with loss. As the men finish cleaning, they hang their tools on wooden racks, hooks in neat rows, ropes coiled like sleeping animals. The order feels ceremonial, as if the act itself wards off disaster. Jiro bows slightly before his tools. They've saved more lives than prayers, he says. You look out across the city from the canal bank. Edo sprawls like a living forest, rooftops like leaves, alleys like branches, ready to catch fire again someday. Somewhere, a temple bell tolls noon, deep and resonant. It sounds like both warning and blessing. One firefighter tosses a rope coil to another, joking, "If the gods won't help, at least this will." The others laugh. Their humour never strays far from fatalism, but it's a laughter that keeps despair at bay. You suspect it's laughter that truly keeps Edo standing. You watch them march away, ropes over shoulders, silhouettes reflected in the water like echoes of past fires. The city, for now, is safe. But peace here always feels temporary, like the brief silence between waves. And as you turn to leave, you catch one last glint from a hanging hook. A spark of light, sharp and brief, like memory itself refusing to go quietly. By the time the next great fire hits, you already know the rhythm. The distant clanging of the hyoshigi clappers, the sudden rise of shouting, the whoosh of wind feeding flame. But this one feels different. You can sense it in the air, thick, metallic, almost alive. The Hikshi sprint past and you, foolishly curious, follow them toward a narrow street where orange light flickers like a living creature behind the paper walls. When they reach the blaze, there's no hesitation. No buckets in sight, no grand water pump. Instead, men fan out like dancers who already know their cues. A signal from the captain, a short bark of orders, and the firebreak plan begins. You watch in awe and a little terror as they start to tear down houses around the fire. Beams crack, tiles shatter, ropes whip through the air, pulling down walls that haven't yet caught flame. The logic of it hits you only after a moment. Destroy a few to save the many. In Edo, this isn't chaos, it's choreography. Two men climb onto the roof of a still-burning home. They carry hooked poles longer than spears. With a single motion, they latch onto the ridge beam and pull, shouting for those below to brace. The roof collapses inward, sparks bursting skyward like 1,000 fireflies. The heat slaps your face, but the men don't flinch. They leap aside, roll to safety, and are up again within seconds, grinning through soot. A nearby onlooker mutters, "They fight like poets of destruction." You think that's exactly right. The Hikishi's philosophy was simple. Don't waste water trying to outpour a fire that feeds faster than you can carry. Water was for the edges, the peripheries, the critical points where ember met structure. But the true weapon was emptiness, removing what the fire craved. This art of controlled destruction became so refined that brigades competed to see who could carve a firebreak fastest. Historians still debate whether this strategy evolved from necessity or from sheer pride. Maybe both. Edo, after all, was a city that turned disasters into rituals. You step aside as a group of men drags a massive timber beam into the street, forming a barricade to slow the wind. Someone pours water over it to dampen the wood, while others use soaked straw mats to cover nearby eaves. The coordination is stunning. Each person moves with instinctive precision, the kind that only repetition, decades of it, can produce. And then, amid the noise, a sound cuts through. The cry of the Matoi bearer. He plants the brigade's tall banner into the ground, shouting the name of his unit. The emblem, a swirling crest resembling waves, glows red in the reflected light. To outsiders, it might seem ridiculous to declare identity in the middle of mayhem, but here it's sacred. The Matoi is both declaration and morale. It says, "We are here. We are fighting." You glance up at the fire itself. It's no longer just a blaze. It's a moving wall, rolling and snapping like a beast made of breath. Sparks float down like deadly snowflakes, settling on your sleeve before hissing away. You think of all those stories, the flowers of Edo, the way people spoke of fire with a strange affection. Seeing it now, you understand. It's horrifying, yes, but it's also mesmerizing, beautiful in its hunger. The Acacia are drenched in sweat, not from water but from sheer effort. Their faces gleam, their coats soaked through. A man near you coughs and laughs at the same time, shouting over the roar, "You can't beat fire, you just convince it to leave early." His partner grins, teeth flashing white in the red light. "And sometimes," he says, "it listens." You catch sight of one firefighter standing still amid the chaos, rope in hand, eyes fixed on the flame's direction. He waits, not frozen by fear, but calculating. The wind shifts, and instantly he moves, signalling his team to demolish the next row. Timing here is everything. One hesitation can doom a district. As buildings collapse, the street fills with ash, thick enough to taste. It's bitter, metallic, like burnt coins. Through it all, the Haikshi move like shadows, voices hoarse but steady. You think of them less as firemen and more as architects of ruin, shaping the destruction to protect what lies beyond. At one point, a woman runs forward, clutching a small box, her family's heirloom perhaps. A firefighter stops her gently, shaking his head. "Leave it. You can rebuild the rest." She hesitates, trembling. Then, with visible pain, she obeys. You see the silent understanding between them, grief deferred in the name of survival. As dawn breaks, the fire begins to yield. The city looks half erased, yet somehow still breathing. The Haikshi move among the ruins, stamping out embers, checking for rekindling sparks. One man pours water from a bamboo pail over a still smouldering beam, the hiss sounding almost like a sigh. The streets are quiet now, only the crackle of cooling wood and the soft murmur of exhausted voices. You see children helping sweep debris, merchants hauling buckets of sand, priests chanting blessings for those who lost homes. Edo, you realise, doesn't just rebuild, it reclaims. A young boy approaches one of the firefighters, offering a rice ball wrapped in a leaf. The man accepts it with a tired smile, then sits on a broken beam and eats slowly, staring into the pale smoke curling skyward. "Another night's flower," he mutters. You walk past them, your feet crunching over charred earth. The smell of cedar and ash lingers. Everywhere, signs of renewal begin. The carpenter's hammer, the chatter of neighbours, the calm after the storm. The Haikshi, for their part, will rest only briefly. Their tools will be cleaned, their coats re-dyed, their ladders inspected. Because everyone knows it's just a matter of time. In Edo, peace is a pause, not a promise. Before you leave, you glance once more at the matoi, still planted in the ground, its crest blackened but unbroken. In the pale dawn, it flutters faintly in the breeze, defiant, beautiful, absurd. And somehow you think that's exactly what courage looks like here, standing proud in the ashes, waiting for the next ember to rise. By now, you've learned to recognise the rhythm of fire, the rising panic, the teamwork, the aftermath. But tonight, the rhythm changes. It's not a blaze that draws you this time. It's a brawl. You hear it before you see it. Shouts, laughter, the sharp crack of wooden clogs on a stone. A crowd gathers at the edge of a market square, and when you push through, you find two brigades of Acacia facing off like rival gangs. Their banners flutter in the lamplight, different crests, different neighbourhoods. You catch snippets of insult flung across the space between them. "Our ropes hold stronger!" Your ladders snap like kindling. And then someone tosses a half-empty sack cup, and the square erupts. It's not rage exactly, it's pride uncoiled. The men grapple, shove and shout, laughing through the scuffle like overgrown boys in festival mischief. You watch them tumble into the dust, coats flaring open to reveal brilliant tattooed skin. A few bystanders cheer, others roll their eyes. "Ah," an old woman mutters beside you, "the flowers of Adi bloom again, even without fire." That's the thing about the Haikshi. They weren't just firemen. They were symbols of the neighbourhoods they protected, each brigade a small army of loyalty and ego. There were dozens across Edo, each identified by a district name and matoi crest. When a fire broke out, the nearest brigades raced to plant their banners first, claiming the fight and with it the glory. But sometimes, as you're seeing now, glory wasn't enough. They wanted reputation. You duck as a bucket flies over your head. Someone laughs, wheezing. At least it's empty this time. The humour doesn't hide the tension, though. Beneath the camaraderie, there's rivalry as fierce as any blaze. Historians still argue whether these fights were genuine hatred or just a performance of masculinity, a way for men constantly flirting with death to prove they were alive. The line, like smoke, blurs easily in Edo. Eventually a captain, a broad man with a shaved head and a voice like a drum, steps between them. "Save it for the next fire," he growls. The laughter dies. Even the most reckless respect rank when it's earned. Slowly the men back away, brushing off dust and pride alike. Later, in the quiet that follows, you sit by the canal with two of them, both bruised and grinning. One spits into the water and says, "We fight because we're family. And families, you know, need to shout sometimes." The other nods, adding, "If we didn't fight each other, we'd fight the gods instead." You smile, unsure if he's joking. Probably not. This fierce identity, part loyalty, part competition, was baked into the structure of Edo itself. The city was divided into wards, each with its own merchants, craftsmen and firefighters. The Hakeshi became the protective pride of their blocks. People brought them food, gifts, even song dedications in thanks. When a brigade succeeded in stopping a fire, the whole neighbourhood celebrated like it was a festival. In time, these rivalries turned into something more ritualistic. During processions and festivals, brigades paraded side by side, smiling for the crowd, glaring at each other when no one watched. There were rules, informal but unbreakable. Never insult another's matoi, never mock a man's coat, and above all, never question his courage. The deeper truth, though, is that this rivalry kept them sharp. Pride became training. Ego became motivation. You can feel it as you watch them practice later that week, climbing ladders higher, swinging ropes faster, as if trying to outdo ghosts from rival brigades. Still, not all competition ended in laughter. Records from the mid-18th century tell of full-blown clashes where rival Hikeshi battled for credit during fires, sometimes injuring one another while homes burned. The shogunate cracked down on these disputes, threatening punishment, but the culture of one-upmanship never fully died. You suspect it couldn't. It was the same spark that made them fearless in the flames. A few days later, you're invited to a post-fire gathering, a casual drinking night among Hikeshi from neighbouring wards. You expect tension, but find instead a strange harmony. They sit around a low table pouring sake into chipped cups, boasting about the fires they've fought and the scars they've earned. Every story ends in laughter, even the tragic ones. At one point, a man named Tamesaburo slaps the table and declares, "You can't trust a man who never burned his boots." The others cheer, raising their cups. You can't help but laugh with them. Their joy is contagious, like a spark spreading through dry grass. Later, when most of them have stumbled home, the captain sits beside you, his voice low and reflective. "We all serve Edo," he says, "but Edo's too big for one heart, so we serve our corners of it. We serve our streets. That's why we fight, because we care." You think of the city's layout, the bridges, the markets, the alleys, all stitched together like a quilt of loyalties. Maybe that's why Edo keeps surviving, because even its divisions burn with devotion. As you leave, the moon hangs low, turning the rooftops silver. You pass one of the matoi poles still standing from a recent fire, the carved crest glinting faintly. On it, someone has tied a scrap of cloth, a small peace offering, perhaps, from one brigade to another. It flutters gently, a soft truce between rivals who live for both flame and brotherhood. The wind shifts, carrying a faint scent of smoke. You can't tell if it's memory or warning. Either way, Edo stirs again, restless and proud. The night has turned ghostly pale when you hear the bells, their tones low, urgent and strangely musical. The sound ripples across Edo like waves, bouncing off wooden eaves, weaving through alleys, rolling over the canals. You pause beneath a firewatch tower, the tall structure looming above you like a skeletal tree against the moon. Up there, silhouetted in the smoke-grey sky, you see the firewatcher, his outline sharp against the glow of his swinging lantern. He strikes his hyoshigi, those hard wooden clappers, 3 times, then pauses listening. The rhythm isn't random, it's coded language. The distance between strikes tells the direction of the fire, the pace marks its distance. In a city this vast, messages travel through sound and light. You watch as another tower answers, faint in the distance, like two lighthouses speaking across a dark sea. These towers, Hinomiyagura, stand guard throughout Edo. From their platforms, watchmen scan the skyline for smoke by day and flame by night. Their job is part vigilance, part endurance. Imagine standing for hours in freezing wind, straining to distinguish a kitchen fire from dawn mist. They wear thick coats and carry conch shells for signalling, their cries echoing above the sleeping city. Keiji, fire in Nihonbashi, and somewhere below, a brigade stirs. You crane your neck and see how the tower sways slightly, ropes tightening against the gust. The man up there doesn't move, his lantern flickering like a heartbeat. From this height, Edo must look like an ocean of roofs, every house a ship carrying families through a sea of potential flame. Down below, the Haikashi are already mobilizing. Their signals are swift and silent. One runner carries a bamboo pole tipped with a small lantern, its colour showing which district burns. Another lights a fuse on a tiny firework that arcs overhead, bursting into a single spark of green. Even in disaster, Edo has its choreography. The coordination is mesmerising. Each brigade knows its territory and its path, weaving through alleys too narrow for carts, guided by sound alone. The bells mark time. The lanterns draw maps in air. You can almost hear the city thinking aloud, communicating through rhythm and light. A boy beside you points upward. "That tower belongs to the Hachimoku Brigade," he whispers proudly. "They spotted the Mireki fire first long ago." His tone carries reverence, like a pilgrim reciting scripture. It's strange, you realise, how even disaster becomes heritage here. You climb partway up the tower's base ladder. The wood creaks, the air colder the higher you go. From halfway up you see the city's veins, streets glowing faintly from oil lamps, 1,000 shadows moving below. The bells still toll, their patterns shifting, overlapping, translating chaos into direction. Each tower's tone is slightly different, one deep as a drum, another high and sharp. Experienced Takeshi can tell which district is calling just by the pitch. It's a soundscape of survival, as familiar to Edo ears as temple bells or market cries. Historians still argue whether the watchtower system was modelled after castle alarm posts, or evolved from merchant lookouts. Either way, it worked. You reach the top platform where the watchman nods without surprise. His face is lined, his eyes distant. "You can see the fire from here," he murmurs, pointing east. You follow his gesture and sure enough, there it is. A faint orange pulse on the horizon, just beginning to rise. From this height it looks almost delicate. You could mistake it for sunrise if not for the way it flickers, restless and alive. The wind brings its smell before its heat. Resin, smoke, the faint sweetness of cedar. You stand silently as the watchman raises his conch shell and blows a long, mournful note. The sound travels farther than the bells, deeper, vibrating through your chest. Below, the city responds like a living organism. Doors slam, sandals slap, dogs bark. The Haikashi form ranks in the streets, their lanterns swinging, their chants beginning. One voice calls, "Matoi up!" and another answers. Soon the great banners rise again, visible even from the tower. The scene looks almost holy from above, an urban liturgy of sound and motion. Smoke curls into patterns that seem almost deliberate, as if Edo itself exhales in rhythm with its protectors. You ask the watchman how many times he sounded the alarm. He laughs softly. Too many to count, but each time it's the same. We ring, they run, the city breathes again. His voice is both weary and proud, like someone describing an endless love affair with danger. He leans on the railing, eyes narrowed against the wind. "Sometimes," he says, "I ring too early. False alarm. Then people curse me for waking them, but I'd rather be cursed than watch them burn." You look again at the glowing horizon. The bells below continue their rhythm, steady, sure. You imagine hundreds of people listening, counting the beats to know how close death is. It's both terrifying and oddly comforting. Order in chaos, pattern in panic. As you climb down, you notice a small plaque nailed near the base of the tower. The writing is faded but still legible. "Fire waits for no man, but sound can outrun flame." You touch the characters gently. The wood is warm, perhaps from the memory of countless nights like this one. Back on the street, the air buzzes with motion. The first runners from the Haikashi pass you, their sandals striking sparks from the stones. The signals have done their work. The chain of command is alive, and once again, Edo turns crisis into choreography. You glance back one last time at the tower, its lantern swaying in the smoke. The bells fall silent now, replaced by the distant roar of flames and the answering chorus of human voices. You realise then that Edo's greatest invention isn't the ladder or the hook, it's communication. Without these towers, these bells, these watchmen who refuse to sleep, the city would vanish in hours. Instead it endures, scarred, singed, but alive. And somewhere between the clang of warning and the first crackle of flame, you find something almost poetic. The sound of a city learning, again and again, how to save itself. You've seen fire before in Edo, but never like this. The night splits open. The sky turned molten. The great fire of Mireki, the one people still whisper about as if it happened yesterday. You're standing near Hibiya when you feel the heat before you see it. A slow pulse that grows into a living wall. The air shudders. Roofs crack like bones. At first you think it's just another neighbourhood blaze, but then the wind shifts, wild and merciless, and the fire leaps, house to house, street to street, like a creature that's learned to run. Edo screams awake. You're swept into the tide of people, children clutching toys, mothers dragging bundles, merchants stumbling under their ledgers. The city, built so close it breathes in unison, now exhales flame. The Hikshi are already there, though, moving through chaos like men born in it. Their matoi banners sway against the glare, their coats dark with sweat and soot. You watch them climb collapsing roofs, tear down walls that still glow red, drag ropes across burning streets. The fire is too large for containment, too wild for strategy, but they still fight because that's what Edo demands of them. A woman nearby sobs as her shop ignites. One firefighter pulls her back, shouting, "Live first, we'll build later." His voice cracks but holds. The wind roars in reply, scattering ash like grey rain. They say this inferno began on March 2nd, 1657, at a small temple near Hongo. Legend says it started when a priest burned a cursed kimono belonging to a girl who died before wearing it. Ironic, poetic, and horrifying. Historians still argue whether that story's true, or whether it was just carelessness on a cold, windy day. Either way, what followed was 3 days of hell. The Mireki fire consumed nearly 70% of Edo, temples, bridges, mansions, and commoner homes alike. Even parts of Edo Castle, the seat of shogunal power, vanished in smoke. You can't fathom it until you see the reality. Fire climbing higher than the watchtowers, reaching for the sky like a second dawn. The Haikshi's ropes are useless now. Their hooks melt in their hands. Yet they keep shouting, keep pulling, even as timbers crash around them. Some form human chains to lead people to the river. You follow one such line toward the Sumida, the ground so hot it blisters your sandals. When you finally reach the water's edge, thousands are already there, huddled, weeping, staring back at the burning skyline. It's not a city anymore, but a living volcano. The river glows red with reflection, waves flickering like molten glass. You kneel, scoop water onto your face, and the steam that rises smells of cedar and grief. Beside you, two Akishi argue whether to cross the river to reach the far bank's fire breaks. One insists it's suicide, the other shrugs, tightening his rope around his waist. "Then we'll die on duty." He plunges into the current, dragging the rope behind him. You lose sight of him in the smoke. The wind howls from the north, turning embers into arrows. People throw themselves flat as fiery flakes rain down, burning through cloth and skin. Yet amid all this chaos, the Haikshi's still raise their voices. Not in fear, but in rhythm. They shout commands, numbers and warnings, keeping order through sound. Their discipline holds even as everything else collapses. By morning the fire has travelled miles. The sun rises blood orange through the haze, a cruel echo of the blaze itself. Edo is unrecognisable. Streets gone, temples reduced to white ash mounds. The air hums with silence, broken only by the creak of wood still cooling. You stumble through what used to be Nihonbashi, your feet sinking into warm dust. The familiar bridge lies half collapsed, its beams charred black. People move like ghosts through the ruins, searching for anything that survived. A pot, a scroll, a photograph of ancestors. Near the remains of a shrine, you find a group of Haikishi sitting in a circle. Their faces are streaked with soot and tears, though none speak of loss aloud. One is carving something into a beam, a crude symbol of his brigade's crest. For the ones who burned fighting, he says quietly. Historians later called the Mereki fire the day Edo was reborn. In the aftermath, the shogunate widened streets, ordered firebreak zones, and forced wealthy samurai to move their mansions away from the commoners' districts. Even the castle was rebuilt with open spaces to let wind pass safely. You realise that out of destruction came reinvention, the very soul of Edo's resilience. Still, the pain lingers. The people sing mournful songs about that night, their melodies soft but heavy. A popular verse goes, "Cherry blossoms fall, but Edo blooms again. Even ashes can dream of spring." It's strange how beauty always sneaks back into this city's tragedies. You walk toward Ueno Hill, where refugees gather among makeshift shelters. From there, you look out at the endless plain of ash and smoke. The air still smells of fire, but in the distance you hear hammers already striking. Carpenters rebuilding, merchants reopening, Edo, unkillable, unstoppable, burning and blooming in the same breath. You spot Jiro, the young firefighter from before, sitting cross-legged nursing a burn on his arm. When you approach, he smiles faintly. "We saved less than we lost," he admits, "but we still have each other. That's enough to rebuild." He tosses a handful of ash into the wind, watching it scatter. "See? Even the fire leaves us something to hold." You don't answer. There's nothing to say. You just sit beside him as the wind carries that grey dust eastward, toward the river, toward the sea, toward the next place that will one day burn and rise again. Morning drifts in soft and grey over Edo. Its light weak but gentle, like a promise that the world still remembers how to begin again. The fires have cooled, the embers finally surrendering to ash. As you walk the streets, you hear the sounds of survival, the steady splash of water being drawn, the thud of hammers, the quiet murmur of prayer. The Haikshi are there too, moving slower than usual, exhaustion etched into their soot-streaked faces. But today they're not the only ones working. The whole city has joined them. You see women and children forming bucket lines that stretch down to the canals, their hands red from cold, their sleeves rolled high. A little girl balances a half-full bucket with both arms wobbling like a crane chick. Her mother laughs and steadies her. It's strange how quickly people learn to move together after catastrophe. The rhythm of passing buckets has its own music, splash, grunt, pour, repeat. The lines snake through alleys and around charred beams, the water darkening the dust. No one orders, no one complains. In Edo, fighting fire is a community dance. A woman near you wrings out a wet towel and presses it over her face. "The smoke still tastes like fear," she mutters, though her eyes hold steel. She was probably among the countless wives who joined the bucket brigades when flames rose too fast for the Haikshi alone. Records speak of these unsung helpers, though history rarely gives them names. You can imagine them, clothing soaked, hair singed, passing bucket after bucket into the dawn until their arms tremble. One old man kneels near a half-collapsed storehouse, prying open a door blackened from the blaze. Inside, barrels of rice remain miraculously unscathed. He laughs aloud, a bright sound in the soot-stained morning. "See? Even fire has manners," sometimes his neighbours cheer, helping him haul the barrels out, stacking them for shared use. You wander through this strange rebirth. The air smells faintly of wet earth, charcoal, and new beginnings. In one corner, a group of children have turned burnt timbers into makeshift swords, shouting that they're fire slayers. Their laughter feels almost defiant. Everywhere you look, water becomes ritual. Wells are blessed by monks, canals dredged to keep them deep and ready. In some districts, townsfolk build new cisterns from copper plates, a precious investment, but one that saves lives. You dip your hands into one and feel the chill ripple through your fingers, a reminder that something so simple can be sacred. Further along, you spot a cluster of shrine maidens kneeling before the charred remains of a temple gate. They're sprinkling salt and water, purifying the ground with rhythmic chants. The Hikshi bow slightly as they pass, acknowledging that not all fire can be fought with tools. Some perhaps must be soothed by prayer. You pause beside one brigade as they rest by a well. Their captain, an older man with a voice like gravel, nods toward the bucket lines. "We couldn't do it without them," he admits. "Half the city's women saved the other half." He's right. During major fires, the bucket lines were the veins of the city, civilians moving water faster than orders could travel. Their teamwork kept temples from burning, bridges from collapsing, and though they had no official titles, their courage filled the gaps when the Haikishi couldn't be everywhere at once. A quirky rumour drifts through the chatter. Some say the well spirits, or Mizugami, help guide water to where it's most needed. You hear a child whisper that if you thank the well before drawing, it'll remember your kindness next fire. You decide not to argue. In a city this fragile, faith is as practical as rope. The Haikishi keep patrolling, not to fight, but to reassure. They walk through the streets, checking burned beams, clearing debris, showing their familiar coats as if to tell the city, we're still here. People wave, bow, offer food. In one alley, an old woman presents a steaming bowl of miso soup to a group of them, insisting they sit and eat. You protect the houses, she says. Let us protect you. You join the bucket line for a while, passing water from hand to hand. The weight is soothing, repetitive, meditative. The faces around you blur into a single shared determination. Somewhere in the distance, someone starts humming a folk tune. Low, rhythmic. The melody passed down from generations who've done this before. Soon others hum along, the song rippling through the line. The sun climbs higher, golden light cutting through the haze. You notice how it gleams on the puddles between cobblestones, how it catches on the damp ropes hanging from drying racks, how it paints halos on the sweat-slick faces of the Hikishi. For a city rebuilt 100 times, Edo somehow still looks proud, still looks alive. Historians still argue whether Edo's resilience came from architecture or attitude. You think it's neither. It's people. People who can laugh while sweeping ash, who can sing while hauling water, who can rebuild a wall and call it a victory over fate. By afternoon, the bucket lines dissolve into laughter. Children splash one another. Women scold them lightly but smile. A few Hikishi join in, pouring water from their buckets onto each other's heads in mock baptism. "Cleanse the soot," someone shouts, and the whole street bursts into laughter. You linger, watching sunlight dance across the soaked ground, feeling the warmth of community stronger than the fading heat of destruction. Fire may have taken the city's shape, but here, among laughter and water, you see what keeps Edo whole. It's people's refusal to burn alone. As dusk approaches, a young mother lifts her child and whispers, "Listen, no bells tonight." She smiles, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the silence is a comfort, not a warning. The air smells of freshly sawn cedar and ink when you wander into the merchant district a few weeks later. Edda hums again, half rebuilt, half remembering. The clack of abacuses echoes under awnings, the scent of grilled eel curls lazily above the canal. Yet beneath that peace, something quieter stirs, a soft, cunning rhythm of alliances, whispered like smoke. You find yourself in the back room of a rice wholesaler's shop, where two men sit across a low table, their conversation half muffled by the creak of sliding doors. One wears the short, rugged hanten of a hikashi, the other a fine silk kimono, merchant's crest glimmering in candlelight. They're drinking tea, not sake. This is business, not pleasure. The merchant speaks first, voice smooth as lacquer. "Our storehouse on Koamicho survived the last fire because your men were quick. I'd like to ensure that good fortune continues." He slides a small wooden box across the table. You catch a glimpse of silver coins within. The firefighter doesn't touch it immediately. He scratches his chin, glances toward the paper door, then finally says, "The city's big." Flames don't always respect silver, but there's a hint of a smile in his voice, a spark of acknowledgement. You realize you're witnessing one of Edo's open secrets, the unofficial protection pacts between Haikishi and merchants. Firefighters, though officially loyal to the shogunate, often protected the warehouses of patrons who donated generously. In return, those merchants funded the upkeep of ladders, ropes, even the lavish festivals that kept the brigade's spirits high. It was corruption and cooperation at once. Edo's favourite kind of paradox. The Hikeishi didn't see themselves as bribed. They saw it as mutual insurance. After all, when a fire swept through, they had to choose which buildings to save first. Better to save the ones that made rebuilding the city possible. Gold doesn't burn, one of them jokes, but it pays for new roofs. Historians still argue whether this blurred line between heroism and self-interest tarnished their reputation or made them more human. You decide it's both. As you leave the shop, you notice a storehouse across the street. Massive, white-plastered walls, thick earthen coating, iron shutters sealed tight. These Kura buildings are the city's treasures, designed to resist fire. Their construction is so clever that even when the rest of Edo turns to ash, these fortresses often survive. The merchants brag about them endlessly, calling them immortal warehouses. But behind every kura stands a silent agreement. The hikashi who guard it, the merchant who feeds their coffers. It's a delicate balance of loyalty and leverage. You wander into a nearby tea house, where a few off-duty firefighters sit drinking and laughing. Their voices are loud, their shoulders loose from drink. One slaps the table and says, "The rich bow now. You see that? Every time the bells ring, they remember who really keeps Edo standing." His friends roar with laughter, half pride, half truth. There's something powerful in that, the knowledge that even in a rigid society ruled by samurai, these men of smoke and soot hold invisible sway. The shogunate may command swords, but the hikashi command flames, and that's often the greater weapon. Still, this influence comes with danger. A rumour spreads through the streets. A merchant accused of paying one brigade for protection while insulting another. The next time his store catches fire, the latter brigade arrives too late. Coincidence, perhaps, or karma with a human face. Edo's justice system, you realise, isn't written in law, but in timing. Later, as you stroll through the Nakamura Theatre District, a kabuki troupe performs a parody of such intrigue. On stage, an actor in a flamboyant firefighter's coat struts across a painted backdrop of flames, declaring, "Even fire bows to silver!" The audience laughs and claps, aware of the satire, but no one denies its truth. In Edo, comedy is just honesty dressed in rouge. You stop at a street corner where an elderly bookseller, his beard white as rice paper, tells you a story. "When I was young," he says, "a hikeshi saved my shop 3 times. I offered him money and he refused. Said, 'I only take payment from those who can afford to burn twice.'" The old man chuckles softly. It's wisdom disguised as arrogance. He's right. These men walk a razor's edge between saviour and scoundrel. Yet the people love them still, because the hikeshi never stop showing up when the bells ring. Whatever their motives, they run toward flame while everyone else runs away. You follow the sound of hammering to a new kura under construction. Craftsmen are plastering the walls with thick clay, smoothing it layer by layer. The foreman explains proudly that this mix, mud, sand, straw, lime, is fire's worst enemy. "A house of air burns," he says. "A house of earth endures." You can almost feel Edo evolving, still wooden, still risky, but learning from every scorch mark. At sunset, you find a small group of hikishi sitting by the river, their matoi poles resting beside them. One, an older man with calloused hands, says, "People think we only fight fire, but mostly we fight time, the time before the next one starts." He tosses a pebble into the water, watching ripples spread. The merchants, the samurai, the carpenters, they all need something from us. And we need them too. Maybe that's the real trick. The city burns, and we all owe each other for rebuilding. As night deepens, the river reflects 100 lanterns flickering on the water's surface. They look like tiny fires, safe, contained, tamed by human will. You realise that in Edo, control isn't about conquering flame, it's about negotiating with it. The Ikishi stand, stretching, their silhouettes dark against the orange glow. One calls over his shoulder, "Remember, every favour's a rope. Some save you, some hang you. Learn which is which, you smile." In a city of fire and favour, that might be the truest wisdom of all. The fires die, but their stories refuse to. You feel it first in the hum of a festival night. Drums pulsing like a heartbeat, laughter spilling down the lantern-lit streets, the air thick with grilled fish and incense. Edo loves to celebrate survival, to turn soot into song. You wander with the crowd, drawn toward the procession near Asakusa, where the hikashi march beneath banners painted with dragons and waves. Tonight they're not fighting fire, they're performing legend. The men carry their mator, those proud wooden emblems, and every time one lifts his pole high, the crowd cheers as if seeing a hero reborn. Some twirl the poles in circles, balancing them with impossible grace, making the carved crests spin like glowing halos under the torchlight. The children gasp, the mothers clap, and you, caught between wonder and laughter, realise that this isn't just entertainment, it's devotion. Edo's firefighters are folk icons, and the city adores them the way others adore gods. A group of young women nearby whisper about one particular hikashi named Kozo. famous not only for his ladder stunts but for the full-body tattoo that marks him as a living canvas. You catch a glimpse when he rolls his sleeves up to wave, his arms shimmering with ink. Waves crash across his biceps, koi leap toward his shoulder, and on his back, you hear later, sprawls a thunder god roaring through clouds. You follow him later to a riverside bathhouse, curious, and find it full of men like him, tattooed, laughing, steam rising in ghostly curtains. Their tattoos aren't just decoration, they tell stories. Some depict the Shutendoji demon's defeat, others the gods of wind and thunder. It's mythology etched in flesh, reminders that courage leaves marks you can't wash away. A quiet, scholarly man soaking beside you remarks, "They wear their souls on their skin." He says it with both awe and worry. Tattoos in Edo are scandalous to polite society, linked with labourers, gamblers, outsiders, but for the Hikshi they're badges of endurance. "We don't fear fire," one man declares with a grin, slapping his chest. "We fear being forgotten." Historians still argue whether these tattoos began as punishment marks for criminals or as voluntary symbols of pride. Either way, the Hikishi claimed them, turned shame into spectacle. You imagine them charging into smoke half naked, skin gleaming with sweat and ink, each one a moving mural of bravery. The flames must have seemed to dance back in recognition. In one corner of the bathhouse, a group of men hums a song between sips of sake, a rough rhythmic chant that goes something like, "Ladders to heaven, ropes to the gods, we climb for the city, we fall for applause." You smile at the honesty. Their courage is real, but they know it's theatre too. Edo expects its heroes to entertain, even when they risk their lives. You wander outside again, past stalls selling woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, depicting the same firefighters mid-action, battling roaring flames or posing atop rooftops. Their muscles bulge, their banners fly, their tattoos shimmer like living armour. The artists exaggerate, of course, it's part of the magic. But these prints spread their fame far beyond the city's smoky nights. Housewives hang them on walls, children collect them like baseball cards of bravery. You buy one, a print by Utagawa Kuniyoshi, showing a Hikeishi leaping from a collapsing roof, fire curling around him like a red wave. The caption reads, "He laughs in the face of flame." It's equal parts myth and memory, exactly as Edo prefers it. Later that evening you pass a storyteller's booth, where a blind bard plucks a shamisen and sings of the fireflowers of Edo. His voice quivers like smoke. "They fight with ladders," he croons, "but their hearts climb higher." People drop coins into his bowl, eyes shining in the firelight. You can't tell if they admire the Haikshi for their courage or their tragedy, or both. Even religion borrows from their legend. At a small shrine near Yushima, you find a new votive tablet depicting Kajidera no Kami, the fire temple deity, painted to look suspiciously like a handsome Hikeishi captain. The priest explains, smiling, "We pray not only to avoid fire, but to have men brave enough to face it." Edo's gods, it seems, wear soot instead of halos. There's another layer to their mythology too, songs and rumours that paint the Hikeishi as lovers of danger in every form. They risk their lives by night, a young tea-house hostess tells you, and hearts by day. She laughs behind her sleeve, and you suspect she's speaking from experience. The city romanticizes them endlessly. The brave rescuer carrying women from smoke. The tattooed hero who vanishes before dawn. It's half gossip, half gospel. But the line between adoration and exploitation is thin. Some Haikshi lean into the fame, becoming minor celebrities, posing for portraits, starring in kabuki plays. Others retreat into silence, uncomfortable with the myth swallowing their truth. They cheer for the story, one older man tells you, but they don't smell the smoke. You think about that as fireworks burst above the river, each bloom of light echoing the very fires these men fight. Edo's crowds cheer, oblivious to the irony. The Haikshi watch too, their faces glowing orange and gold. Maybe they see beauty in it, a harmless imitation of their enemy. When the night ends, the last drum fades, the last lantern guttering low, you walk home through the still streets. The air smells faintly of ink and burnt oil. On a wall, someone's drawn a quick sketch in charcoal. A firefighter raising a ladder toward a star. Below it, a scribbled phrase. "May courage outlive the embers." You stop and trace the letters with your fingertips. The city sleeps now, but its myths are awake. painted on paper, carved in wood, etched on skin. Edo may rebuild endlessly, but its true immortality lies here, in the stories that refuse to cool. You realise then that fire didn't just forge their courage, it forged their culture. The Hikashi didn't just save a city, they gave it a legend to dream by. You walk again through Edo's rebuilt streets, wider now, cleaner, the smell of new cedar soft in the air. But something in the city's rhythm feels heavier, slower. The Hikashi still patrol, still grin, still swagger when children shout their names. But you sense tension in the way magistrates watch them, hands tucked neatly into the folds of official robes. Firefighting, it seems, has become political. The shogunate's officials stand at the edge of a recent fire site, taking notes with narrow brushes, while the Hikashi stand waiting for permission to leave. It's an odd sight. Men who charged into infernos now waiting for clerks to nod. You see the discomfort in their posture, that twitch of pride barely restrained. You overhear a merchant whisper, "They save the city but scare the rulers." He's not wrong. The Tokugawa government, strict and hierarchical, liked everything predictable, but the Hikashi were anything but. They were powerful, organised, beloved by commoners, and occasionally uncontrollable. Their popularity gave them influence, their unity gave them potential. And potential, in Edo politics, was dangerous. Historians still argue whether the shogunate truly feared a Hikashi uprising or simply disliked their independence. Either way, the bureaucracy began to tighten its grip. Rules appeared, how many men per brigade, what uniforms to wear, even which streets each unit could patrol. What had been a living network of neighbourhoods turned into a chain of regulations. You noticed the shift one afternoon during a public demonstration at Ueno. The Hikashi are performing their acrobatic ladder drills again, Hashigo Nori, but this time magistrates stand nearby, fanning themselves, counting, noting, measuring. The crowd claps politely, but the laughter feels rehearsed. The performance that once embodied freedom now feels like a test. The captain from the Hachimoku Brigade, gruff, broad-shouldered, always half a joke on his lips, leans against his ladder and mutters to you, "They like us loud when we fight fire, quiet when we talk." You ask if he'll obey. He smirks. Obeying and listening aren't the same thing. Later you find him drinking with other captains in a cramped izakaya. The air smells of grilled mackerel and defiance. They complain not about danger, but about interference, inspectors who second-guess their demolitions, officials who scold them for damage after fires. "They want us to save the city," one grumbles, without breaking a single tile. Laughter ripples low and bitter, but the Hikashi's power runs deeper than paper decrees. They are in many ways the pulse of the people. When they enter a district, residents cheer. When they visit markets, children swarm them. They are living proof that courage doesn't need a family crest. And that kind of loyalty, no matter how innocent, threatens those who rule by fear, not love. One magistrate, a sharp-eyed man named Sano, begins enforcing stricter discipline. He orders inspections of the firehouses, confiscates illegally modified tools, fines brigades for reckless demolitions. Rumour says he even arrests a captain for insulting an officer during a blaze. You hear about it days later, the man stripped of rank, forced to shave his head. The Hikashi call it burning without fire. A few resist quietly. Some hold processions that double as protests, marching through districts under the guise of ceremony, raising their matoi higher, chanting old slogans louder than required. The city pretends not to notice the tension beneath the pageantry. At the same time, the samurai class, once aloof, begins to resent the firefighters' fame. They're peasants with applause, one lord scoffs, watching a parade from his palanquin, but he doesn't miss how people cheer louder for the Hikashi than for his own retinue. Edo's social order, so carefully balanced, begins to tilt in small but visible ways. Still, not all authority is blind. Some magistrates recognise the Hikashi's value. You overhear one saying, "Better their courage unruly than our city in ash," a rare kind of wisdom in an era that worships obedience. Meanwhile, the Hikashi adapt as they always do. They learn to navigate politics like they navigate fire, with timing, instinct, and the occasional quiet act of rebellion. A captain might bow low to a magistrate in public, then defy his orders privately if it means saving more lives. You witness one such moment during a small blaze near the fish market. The official on site insists that the brigade wait for approval to tear down a building. The captain looks him dead in the eye, then orders his men to start anyway. The fire halts within an hour. The magistrate sputters with fury, but even he can't argue with success. Later, as the smoke clears, the captain grins at you. See? Paper burns faster than wood. That night you visit the shrine where Haikshi leave offerings, small bundles of rope, carved wooden hooks and folded slips of paper bearing prayers. You notice a new inscription scrawled at the base of one statue. We fight fire, not masters. Someone's written it quickly, defiantly. The ink still glistens wet. But rebellion here doesn't come with banners or speeches. It's subtler, embedded in laughter, in ignored edicts, in the way Hikshi still swagger through streets despite scoldings. The people cheer them as loudly as ever, and every cheer is a small act of resistance. By the late 18th century, Edo's power structure shifts yet again. The shogunate grows wary, but also weary. Fires continue, life continues, and the Haikshi remain indispensable. A grudging peace settles, a recognition that no amount of law can replace courage. You stand one evening at Nihonbashi as the sunset glows red behind the skyline. A pair of officials passes by, whispering about budgets and reforms. Ahead of them, two Haikshi share a joke, their laughter loud enough to turn heads. For a moment, Edo seems perfectly balanced. Paper and rope, ink and sweat, rule and rebellion. The city endures not because of order or chaos, but because both know when to bow to the other. And in that fragile harmony, you see the truth. Edo's real politics aren't written in edicts, they're written in ash. The years drift forward, and Edo begins to look less like a wooden dream, and more like a city of smoke learning to become stone. The fires still come, but the edges of the flames meet new defences. Brick walls, copper roofs, iron fittings. You wander the streets again, noticing that the air feels different. The old rhythms remain, the shouts of vendors, the slosh of water buckets, but beneath it all hums something new, the slow throb of modernisation. You find the Haikshi by the Smida River, lounging on the steps of a warehouse newly fitted with copper tiles. Their old tools, hooks, ropes, ladders, lie beside something strange, a gleaming steam pump imported from the west. The captain grins at your puzzled look. They say this one spits water faster than 10 men, he says, patting it like a sleeping horse. Then, lowering his voice, he adds, but it complains louder than 20. You both laugh. The old jokes survive even when the city changes. The Tokugawa shogunate is fading now, replaced by reformers who whisper of railroads, telegraphs and factories. With these come new firefighting machines, metal nozzles, hand-pulled pumps, iron-reinforced buckets. The Haikshi gather to study them like curious children. Some marvel, others scoff. We fought with ropes, and now they want us to fight with kettles, one mutters, shaking his head. But progress moves faster than nostalgia. Foreign engineers demonstrate how steam power can send water shooting in long, perfect arcs. Crowds gasp. The old ladders, once proud symbols of skill, look suddenly quaint beside these brass monstrosities. Yet when the engineers ask for volunteers to test the machine, it's the Haikshi who step forward first, barefoot, fearless, laughing as always. You watch them operate the contraption, muscles flexing as they pump its handles, water bursting forth in rhythmic jets. For a moment the blend of wood and metal, sweat and steam feels like a meeting of centuries. Still, some of the old guard refuse to yield. A retired captain named Otatsu, his nickname as sharp as his tongue, snorts when asked about modernisation. You can't charm fire with gears, he says. It listens only to courage. His words linger, proud but trembling like smoke that refuses to clear. The Meiji era dawns in 1868, and with it, Edo itself is renamed Tokyo, the eastern capital. The old Haikshi system dissolves into something more structured. The Shoboshi, the modern fire brigade. Gone are the neighbourhood-based units. Gone, too, the swaggering independents. In their place stand uniforms of dark wool, brass buttons, and discipline imported from Europe. You attend their first public drill in the new city square. The crowd watches in respectful silence as neat rows of men march in formation. Their hoses glisten, their helmets shine. Everything is efficient, proper, and strangely sterile. The chaotic poetry of the old Haikshi is gone. The tattoos, the shouts, the jokes half lost in smoke. A boy beside you tugs his father's sleeve. "Where are the ladders?" he asks. The father smiles faintly. "Those were from Edo," he says. "This is Tokyo now." Yet, even as the city modernizes, echoes of the past remain. The new firefighters still use Hashigo Nori, the acrobatic ladder stunts, during New Year's parades, now purely ceremonial, a salute to their ancestors. You attend one such performance at the turn of the century. Young men climb 20-foot ladders, balancing on one hand, twisting in mid-air while drums thunder below. The crowd roars. You imagine the ghosts of Edo's old haikishi smiling in approval. Historians still debate whether the transition was progress or erasure. Did Tokyo gain safety but lose soul? You can't decide. Watching the new brigade march, you feel both admiration and ache. Efficiency saved lives. Yes, but the chaos had once felt alive. The old haikishi weren't just professionals. They were symbols, stories, fire embodied. At twilight, you visit one of the remaining fire lookout towers, half hidden between new brick warehouses. The city has built taller buildings now, but the tower still stands, its wood dark with age. You climb the creaking stairs, hearing every step echo like memory. From the top, the skyline stretches, modern, glittering yet faintly haunted. You swear you can still see patches of old Edo beneath the lamps, narrow alleys, tiled roofs, smoke drifting from fish stalls. Below, the new brigade's firehouse hums with mechanical rhythm, gears clicking, wheels squeaking. But then a sound cuts through. Laughter. Rough, human, unmistakable. You lean out and see a few off-duty firefighters sitting on the steps, sleeves rolled, swapping stories. One shows a tattoo peeking just above his collar, a small koi fish swimming upward. It's subtle, almost hidden, but it makes you grin. The old spirit isn't gone, it's just learned to whisper. You descend and find a small stone monument near the base of the tower. The inscription reads, "Here stood the guardians of Edo's fire who fought destruction with courage and laughter." Beneath it, someone has left offerings. A coil of hemp rope, a miniature matoi carved from cedar, and a folded note that simply says, "Arigato." As the sun dips below Tokyo's skyline, you realize the line between past and present isn't a wall, it's a flickering edge, like flame. The haikishi live on not just in drills or uniforms, but in every person who dares to protect something fragile with their bare hands. You look back one last time at the tower, silhouetted against the neon glow of a new age. The city hums with electricity now, but somewhere in its heart, a bell still rings softly, the same rhythm that once called men from sleep to battle, smoke and wind. The fire may have changed shape, but the courage remains. And as night settles, you feel the warmth of Edo still flickering beneath Tokyo's glass and steel, like an ember refusing, even now, to fade. The winter night carries no ash, only memory. You walk through Tokyo's modern streets, their bright neon signs reflecting in puddles left by the evening rain, and somewhere between the glow of vending machines and the echo of passing trains, you feel it again. The ghost of Edo's heartbeat. There's no visible trace of the old haikishi here, no hemp ropes coiled on doorsteps, no wooden watchtowers or crests waving above rooftops. Yet the spirit that once made men climb burning ladders for strangers lingers quietly beneath the concrete. You sense it in the fire stations that hum with fluorescent light, where today's firefighters sleep in shifts, boots lined up at the ready. You visit one such station near Ryogoku. The air smells faintly of engine oil and soap, and the walls are covered with photos, black and white images of men in Edo coats, faded sketches of matoi banners, and newspaper clippings of Tokyo's great fires. Ginza, 1923, 1945, 1967. A young firefighter, no older than 20, greets you with an easy grin. His uniform gleams, synthetic fabric replacing the old quilted cotton. But when he speaks of his work, the tone is the same you heard centuries ago. Humble, proud, a little reckless. He gestures toward a framed print of an Edo Ikeishi. "They say we come from them," he says, "but I think we just keep borrowing their courage." He's right. The lineage runs deeper than names or uniforms. Modern Tokyo's firefighters inherit not only the duty but the attitude. That peculiar Edo blend of swagger and selflessness, humour and heroism. They still train in ladder acrobatics every new year, still bow before the memorials of their predecessors, still tell stories that sound half like jokes, half like prayers. You follow him outside where the rain has stopped and the city lights flicker across the wet pavement. He points to a mural on the wall, painted in bold, fluid strokes. It shows the evolution of Japan's firefighters, from barefoot men in Hampton coats to helmeted crews beside gleaming red engines. And yet, each figure, no matter the century, holds a rope, a hook, a ladder. The tools change, he says softly, but the climb stays the same. As you walk away, you imagine the echoes. You picture Jiro, the young Edo firefighter, standing in these same streets long before they were paved. Ropes over his shoulder, soot on his face, eyes fixed on another dawn. You picture him watching these new engines roar past and maybe, just maybe, nodding in approval. Edo's people used to call their fires flowers. Terrible, fleeting, strangely beautiful. And maybe that's still true. Every siren you hear tonight feels like another petal falling, bright and brief, proof that the city still dares to burn and bloom again. Historians still debate what defined Edo's Haikushi most, their loyalty, their artistry, their chaos, or their courage. You decide it was all of it, woven together like the threads of their coats, unassuming, practical, and unbreakable. Each man was part craftsman, part warrior, part fool, and together they made a culture that could face annihilation and still find reason to laugh. You pause near the Sumida River, where the old city's pulse first began. The water laps softly against stone embankments, and somewhere in the distance a temple bell tolls midnight. For a moment, you imagine the reflection of a matoi rising in the river's surface, rippling like a ghostly banner. The sound of bells becomes the echo of hyoshigi clappers. The neon lights shimmer like distant firelight, and Tokyo, for one fragile breath, feels like Edo again. You think about everything the Haikushi taught this city, that safety isn't the absence of danger, but the willingness to face it together. That laughter can carry you through smoke, that even destruction can be met with grace, with ropes, hooks, and open hands. And so, standing in the quiet, you take one last look at the skyline, the towers like ladders, the clouds like drifting embers, and whisper a silent thank you to those who came before. You can almost hear their voices carried by the wind. Keep watch, keep courage, keep climbing. The rain begins again, gentle this time, washing the streets clean. The story slows now, its edges softening like cooling ash. The city quiets, and so do you. Imagine the smell of wet wood after a storm, the hum of distant traffic blending with the whisper of the river. You let your breath follow that rhythm, slow, steady, like the passing of a bucket in a long, unbroken line. The Haikushi's ropes have long turned to dust, their hooks rusted, their ladders gone. But their courage never left. It simply learned new shapes, new streets, new names. You picture them resting now, their ghosts warm and content, watching over a city that still remembers how to start again. You too can rest, because somewhere, in another alley, another time, someone else stands ready to fight the fire for you. The lights dim. The night folds itself around the story. Sweet dreams.